I'm Sarah, and for 22 years, I believed family meant sacrifice. I believed that love was measured in unpaid bills and silent suffering. I was wrong about everything. It started when I turned 18. Dad set me down at our kitchen table, his weathered hands folded over a stack of papers that would become my prison sentence. "Time to learn adult responsibilities, kiddo," he said, sliding the first bill toward me like a dealer revealing cards. "You're paying rent now, and utilities, and groceries for the house." Mom nodded from behind her coffee cup, that practiced smile of hers never quite reaching her eyes. "It's only fair, honey. You're working now. Family helps family." The numbers made my stomach drop. Rent, $800. Utilities, $200. Groceries, $300. Insurance, $150. Phone bill for the whole family, $180. My paycheck from the local diner was $1,400 a month. They were asking for $1,630. "But that's more than I make," I whispered. Dad's expression hardened into that granite mask I'd learned to fear. "Then you'll work harder. Get a second job. That's what adults do." My brother Jake, 3 years older and living rent-free in the basement, looked up from his gaming setup long enough to shrug. "Sucks to be you, sis." The sound of his expensive headphones, bought with money that should have gone to bills, clicked back into place. That night, I lay awake calculating impossible math. Work 2 jobs, sleep 4 hours, repeat. I had no choice. Family helps family, right? For 4 years, I became the personal ATM. I worked breakfast shift at the diner, afternoon shift at a retail store, and weekends at a cleaning service. My social life died first. Who had time for friends when you're working 80 hours a week? My health followed. Dark circles became permanent fixtures under my eyes. My hands cracked from constant dishwater and cleaning chemicals. Jake, meanwhile, had discovered cryptocurrency. He'd spend entire days explaining his investments while I handed over grocery money I'd earned scrubbing toilets. "You just don't understand the future of finance," he'd say, ordering another $40 pizza while I ate ramen for the 5th day straight. Mom developed a new hobby, expensive wellness retreats. "I deserve some self-care," she'd announce, booking $500 spa weekends while I missed meals to cover the electricity bill. Sarah understands sacrifice. She's so mature. Dad bought a fishing boat. Used, but still $15,000. "A man needs to unwind," he justified. "Besides, this is an investment. We'll rent it out." We never rented it out. It sat in our driveway like a monument to my exhaustion. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was calculating whether I could afford both gas for my car and lunch for the week when I opened the mail. Credit card statement. In Mom's name. Balance, $8,000. Purchase history, spa treatments, expensive dinners, shopping sprees. My hands shook as I rifled through more mail. Dad's statement, $12,000. Boat supplies, fishing equipment, restaurant charges during the workdays when he claimed he was too broke to buy his own lunch. Jake's bank statement had somehow gotten mixed in. I stared at the numbers. Savings account, $23,000. $23,000 while I was choosing between gas and food. They had money. They had savings. They had been using me as their personal piggy bank while they lived like royalty off my labor. The rage that hit me was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not hot anger, but something cold and calculating. Something that whispered, "It's time to play a different game." I started my research that day. First, I opened a new bank account at a different bank, One they'd never know about. Every spare dollar, and I mean every single dollar, went into that account. I stopped buying anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. No new clothes, no entertainment, no convenience foods. I lived on rice, beans, and whatever free food I could get from work. Next, I started documenting everything. Every payment I made, every bill I covered, every expense they claimed they couldn't afford. I photographed their purchases, their bank statements when I could access them, their receipts left carelessly around the house. I also began to watch them, really watch them. Dad wasn't working as many hours as he claimed. I followed him once and found him at a sports bar, buying rounds to strangers while I was working my second shift. Mom's job hunting consisted of lunch dates with friends at expensive restaurants. Jake wasn't even pretending to look for work anymore. The most devastating discovery came when I found their tax returns. Combined, they made $95,000 a year. They were living below the poverty line by choice, forcing their daughter to subsidize their lifestyle while they played victim. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to leave. I was going to make sure they experience exactly what they'd put me through. I researched landlord-tenant laws, discovered my rights, and learned something beautiful. I was a tenant, not just their daughter. And as a tenant, I had legal protections they'd never bother to learn about. I also discovered something else through a contact at work. Their mortgage company was looking to sell distressed loans. Our family's home's mortgage was 3 months behind. They've been using my rent money for their lifestyle instead of paying the actual bills they claimed it covered. The plan began forming like ice crystals, beautiful and sharp. I started working 3 jobs instead of 2, pushing my savings account toward a very specific goal. I needed $30,000. It took me 8 months. 8 months of sleeping 4 hours a night, of living on crackers and peanut butter, of ignoring every social invitation, and working until my body screamed for rest. During this time, I became someone else. The naive girl who believed family meant endless sacrifice died somewhere between my second and third job. What emerged was harder, smarter, and absolutely ruthless. I stopped showing emotions around them. When they demanded money, I paid it without argument. When they complained about their financial struggles, I nodded sympathetically. When they bragged about their purchases, I smiled and congratulated them. They thought I'd finally learned my place. They had no idea I was building their cage. By December, I had my $30,000 and something even more valuable: information. Through my contact at the bank, I learned their mortgage was about to be sold to a debt collection company. The company was small, local, and willing to work with individual buyers under the right circumstances. I incorporated an LLC through a lawyer I'd found who worked for cheap. Sunrise Property Solutions existed solely on paper, with a P.O. box address and a business bank account. On paper, I didn't exist. Sunrise did. The debt collection company was thrilled to sell the mortgage to a local investment company. $30,000 later, I owned my parents' debt. All of it. House, car loans, credit cards, everything they defaulted on while using my money for their entertainment. I waited until New Year's Day to make my move. They were all hungover from their expensive champagne celebration, paid for with my January rent money, naturally, when I sat them down at the same kitchen table where this had all begun. "I have an announcement," I said, placing a folder on the table. "I'm moving out at the end of the month." Dad laughed, that condescending sound I'd heard 1,000 times. "No, you're not. You have responsibilities here, adult responsibilities." "You're right," I said, opening the folder. "I do have responsibilities. That's why I wanted to discuss your debt situation." The first document I slid across was their mortgage statement. Did you know you're 4 months behind? The bank was going to foreclose in 60 days. Mom's face went white. That's impossible. We've been making payments. With my money, yes, but apparently you've been spending my money elsewhere. I showed them the credit card statements, the receipts, the bank records I collected. Spa treatments, restaurant meals, fishing equipment, while telling me you were broke. Jake finally looked up from his phone. What's your point, Sarah? I smiled, and I knew it was a cold smile because I'd practiced it in the mirror. The point is that I bought your debt. All of it. I own your mortgage now. I own your car loans. I own everything. The silence that followed was beautiful. That's impossible, Dad whispered. I pulled out the legal documents. Sunrise Property Solutions, that's my company, purchased your defaulted loans from the collection agency. It's all perfectly legal. I have new payment terms for you. I slid the final document across the table. Your monthly payment to me will be $2,800. That covers the mortgage, both car payments, and the minimum on your credit cards, due on the first of every month. We can't pay that, Mom shrieked. We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll need to get second jobs, maybe third jobs. That's what adults do. I used Dad's exact words and watched his face crumble as he recognized them. Sarah, honey, be reasonable. We're family. Family helps family. Mom's voice had taken on that wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. You're absolutely right. Family does help family. That's why I'm offering you such generous terms. Any other investor would have foreclosed immediately and sold the house out from under you. I'm giving you the chance to keep your home. This is insane, Jake jumped up. You can't do this to us. I already did. I stood up, straightening my coat. Payment is due February 1st. After that, you'll have a 15-day grace period before I begin foreclosure proceedings. The contracts are all there. I'd suggest you read them. Where will you go? Mom asked weakly. I bought a small house across town. Pay cash. It's amazing what you can afford when you're not subsidizing other people's lifestyles. Dad found his voice. You vindictive little bitch. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. Until I was 18, I corrected. After that, I paid for my own roof and yours and Jake's. For 4 years, I worked myself into the ground to pay for your comfort while you live like kings off my labor. We taught you responsibility, he shouted. You're right. You taught me that adults work for what they have, that family members don't exploit each other, that actions have consequences. I picked up my folder. Consider this your final lesson in adult responsibility. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Jake, you might want to start job hunting. Your gaming equipment isn't going to pay Mom and Dad's bills. The next 3 months were magnificent. I watched from my new home, a small but perfect house with a garden and a view of the lake, as my family learned what I'd known for 4 years, what it felt like to work multiple jobs, what it felt like to choose between gas and groceries, what it felt like to have no social life because every moment was dedicated to earning money for survival. Dad got a job at a warehouse, working nights. Mom started cleaning offices, the same kind of work I'd done to pay their bills. Jake, after his gaming equipment got repossessed for non-payment of his credit cards, finally got a job at a fast food restaurant. They made their first payments on February 1st, exactly on time. All crumpled 20s and 5s, clearly scraped together from multiple sources. Dad looked like he'd aged 5 years in a month. This isn't sustainable, Sarah, Mom pleaded during the handoff. We can't keep this up. I did it for 4 years. I'm sure you'll figure it out. By April, something interesting happened. Jake actually thanked me. He said, I was a spoiled asshole. I didn't realize what you were going through, what we were putting you through. And now you do? He nodded, his hands raw from dishwater, just like mine used to be. I'm sorry, Sarah. Really sorry. I studied his face, looking for manipulation, for the angle. I found only exhaustion and genuine regret. Apology accepted, I said finally, but this doesn't change the business arrangement. I know, and I don't want it to. We needed this wake-up call. Mom and Dad took longer to come around. By summer, they'd settled into their new reality, but the resentment was still there. They paid their bills on time, worked their jobs, but they looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. By fall, something shifted. Dad knocked on my door on a Saturday morning, hat in his hands like a supplicant. He came to apologize and to ask if you'd consider renegotiating the terms. The payments are too high? I asked. No, we're managing, but I wanted to ask if you'd consider selling the house back to us. We've saved some money and we want to make this right. I invited him in, made coffee, and we talked like adults for the first time in my life. Really talked. He was scared, he admitted. When you turned 18, I saw you growing up and leaving, and I panicked. I thought if I made you responsible for the household, you'd stay. I thought I was keeping the family together. Instead, you trapped me. Instead, I trapped you. And we got comfortable with it, with having you take care of everything while we acted like children. The conversation lasted 3 hours. By the end, we'd worked out a plan. I'd sell them back the house for exactly what I'd paid, the $30,000 in back debt. They'd have 2 years to save the money, during which they'd pay me $1,200 monthly, enough to cover the actual mortgage and expenses, but not the punitive amount I was charging. Why are you doing this? He asked. Because you're right, we're family. And family helps family. But real help means everyone contributing, not one person sacrificing everything for everyone else's comfort. Today, 3 years later, I run a small art studio downtown. I paint landscapes and teach art classes to children. I have friends, hobbies, time to read books and take long baths. I sleep 8 hours a night and eat vegetables that aren't canned. My family and I have dinner together once a month. We split the bill. Everyone pays for their own meal, their own drink, their own dessert. It sounds petty, but it's not. It's respectful. It acknowledges that we're all adults with our own responsibilities. Jake finished his degree and works as a computer programmer. He's still paying off his credit card debt, but he's proud of managing his own finances. Mom and Dad paid off the house early, 6 months ahead of schedule. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, if I should have just moved out and cut contact instead of orchestrating their financial education so precisely. But then I remember the girl I was at 18, working herself to death while they lived in comfort off her labor, and I feel only satisfaction. They learned what I learned, that respect is earned, that love without boundaries is exploitation, and that sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who need the harshest lessons in how to treat you properly. I kept a photo from that New Year's Day confrontation. Dad's face when he realized I owned everything he thought he controlled. I don't look at it often, but when I do, I remember that moment when I stopped being a victim and became the architect of my own justice. Some people call it revenge. I call it education. The best kind. The kind that teaches permanent lessons about consequences, respect, and the true meaning of adult responsibility. And every month when I deposit that mortgage payment into my business account, I remember that sometimes the best way to help your family is to refuse to enable them,